Friends, again, grace and peace to you. And yes, today is our final Sunday in Lamentations, for which there was much rejoicing, which means next week we shift into something different. Next Sunday, the first Sunday in October, is World Communion Sunday. And so we will celebrate that sacrament together and remind ourselves that what we do at this table isn't just unique to us, but is one shared by disciples across the world. As I was reflecting on that for next week, I also realized in over a decade of ordained ministry, this church is on track to welcome more new members into membership, to marry more people, to baptize more people than we have buried this year. That's a good thing. And we will celebrate that next Sunday as we welcome new folks into membership and as we baptize 4 people. So, if you had plans next weekend, cancel them. Be here next Sunday. And it'll be a far more joyous sermon and series of readings because we're going to talk about stewardship starting next month. It's always my favorite. No one else seems to be excited about that. All right, our last reading from Lamentations comes to us from Lamentations, the 5th and final chapter, with the selected verses. Let's listen again for a word from God to us this day. Jeremiah writes a final time. Lord, consider what has become of us. Take notice of our disgrace. Look at it. Our property has been turned over to strangers. Our houses belong to foreigners. We have become orphans, having no father. Our mothers are like widows. We drink our own water, but for a price. We gather our own wood, but pay for it. Our hunters have been at our necks. We are worn out and have no rest. We held out a hand to Egypt and to Assyria to get sufficient food. Our fathers have sinned and are gone, but we are burdened with their iniquities. Slaves rule over us. There is no one to rescue us from their power. But you, Lord, you will rule forever. Your throne lasts from one generation to the next. Why do you forget us continually? Why do you abandon us for such a long time? Return us, Lord, to yourself. Please, let us return. Give us new days like those long ago. Friends, this too is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, 5 chapters later, and nothing has changed. 2,300 words later, and Jeremiah is still sitting in that same spot we first found him, staring at that same lone sandal in the dust as he continues to rub his wrists from the handcuffs that once held him captive. From his viewpoint atop the ash and rubble of his former prison, the city that was once so full of people, so full of music and joy, still lies deserted. The marketplace, once teeming with spices, still reeks of blood and bodies. The walls are still split open. The gates still ripped from their hinges. The temple where heaven and earth once touched, still left divinely abandoned. The kings who basked in their egos for so long are still exiled from the land. The priests, still chained to those same parishioners they took advantage of. The judges who defiled the idea of justice, still screaming for mercy. Because Babylon wasn't just interested in conquering Jerusalem. Their intent was to ensure that the city could never return. As Carol pointed out for us last week, Babylon salted the fields on their way out of town, making sure the land itself was poisoned so that even the soil would become a memorial to Jerusalem's defeat. Babylon poisoned the wells and the streams so that Jerusalem's water became just as bitter as their tears. And to guarantee that this devastation would become a generational one, Babylon rounded up every leader they could find. Every priest, every poet, every tradesman, every artisan, every person of wealth, person of influence, person of position, bound them in chains and forcibly marched them the 900 miles back to Babylon. It's in these types of situations that everyone's favorite Presbyterian minister, Mr. Rogers, gets quoted. There's his famous quote, "Look for the helpers." But a quick peek down Jerusalem's streets find us no helpers, but only those in need of help. The sick left to die in the rubble, the injured crawling through ash, the elderly slumped against broken walls, orphan children no more than 9 years old, wandering the streets alone. These are the ones that Babylon has left behind. These are the ones who are now responsible for restoring Jerusalem back to her former glory. And so what does Jeremiah do in all of this? What does this able-bodied, relatively unscathed prophet of God do? Well, he sits there in the ash, staring at that one lone sandal in the dust, and he chooses to complain for 5 entire chapters. Instead of soothing the tears of orphans, he whines about how lonely sits the city that was once so full of people, narrating this atrocity almost at a distance, as if he himself isn't there in the middle of it, as though he is not part of this, separating himself from the pain by referring to Jerusalem as a grieving woman and saying things like, "She has become a widow. Once a princess among provinces, she has now become a slave. She has become a joke and weeps bitterly in the night as her children, they have all gone away." Instead of searching for food for the hungry, Jeremiah moans about his own stomach churning, placing the blame at the feet of God and saying, "You have become like an enemy. You destroyed Israel. You destroyed all her palaces. You made ruins of her city. You multiplied mourning with more mourning." And instead of binding the wounds of the injured, he sinks deeper into his own grief. The memory of my suffering and my homelessness is bitterness and poison. I can't help but remember and be depressed. Professor and novelist Amos Oz was once said in an interview, "There's a fire, and the flames are big and they are horrific. Every one of us has to choose what to do when confronting a big fire. You can run for your life and leave those who cannot run to burn because unfortunately they cannot run. You can write an angry letter to the editor blaming those who started the fire. But you can also take a bucket of water and pour it on the fire. And if you don't have a bucket, use a glass or a cup. And if you don't even have that, use a teaspoon. Every one of us has a teaspoon. Fill it with water and throw it in the fire." And this is my frustration with the prophet Jeremiah. Jerusalem is on fire. The flames are big and they are horrific. People are running for their lives, and Jeremiah cannot be bothered to pick up a bucket or a glass or a cup or even a teaspoon of water to help put out the flames. He sits there in the ash and he laments. This past week, I was introduced to the story of Adi Barkin. At just 33 years old, and just 4 months after the birth of his first child, Adi was diagnosed with ALS, the terminal disease that slowly robs a person of their ability to move and speak, to eat, and even to breathe. It was about a year into his diagnosis. Adi happened to be on the same cross-country flight as the then senator from Arizona, Jeff Flake. H.R. 1 was soon coming to the floor of the Senate, a bill which would drastically cut funding to Medicare and to disability benefits. So as another passenger filmed the interaction, Adi took the opportunity to lobby the senator right there in business class to vote no on the bill that would not only endanger his life, but also the life of millions of other people in this country. As their conversation ended, Adi, with his shaky voice, said to Senator Flake, "This is your chance to be an American hero." And out of those words, the Be a Hero Fund was born. A movement built around the one conviction that healthcare is not a privilege just for those who can afford it, but a human right for all people. Years later, Jimmy Kimmel interviewed Adi, and he asked whether Adi felt optimistic that real change would come from his work with the Be a Hero Fund. Adi, now confined to a wheelchair and only able to speak through the use of a computer, answered the question with this: "With everything going on in the world, I am not optimistic about the future. I don't have a prediction how it will go, but I am hopeful about the future." And here's the difference between optimism and hope. Optimism is an opinion. Hope is a spur to action. Hope is not a lottery ticket we cling to. It is a hammer we use to smash the emergency glass, to sound the alarm, and to spring us into action. Hope is not a state of mind. It's a state of action. So yes, I am filled with hope because our future remains totally unwritten. But we are the authors of that collective hope. And we hold the pen. I think that's what has me so frustrated with Jeremiah these past 4 weeks. The city is burning. The orphans are crying. The people are starving, and God's prophet sits in the rubble, pouring out complaint after complaint. And yet, those very complaints become the call to hope that gathers the entire community back together. All of his talk of she has become a widow, and you have destroyed Israel, and my suffering and my homelessness suddenly shifts here in chapter 5 as Jeremiah prays, "Lord, consider what has become of us. Take notice of our disgrace. We have become orphans. We drink our own water." And then he closes his prayer with these words: "Remember us, Lord. Please let us return. Give us new days like those long ago." It's as though Jeremiah no longer sits in the ash by himself. But he is now joined with every sick, injured, elderly, and orphan that has been left in that once great city. It's as though Jeremiah's lament no longer belongs to him, but to every broken heart, every churning stomach, every weary body that is still clinging to life in the shadow of so much chaos. That's the paradox of lament. At first glance, it can appear rather passive, as a laundry list of complaints, a waste of time. But when said out loud from a place of faith, it has this power to gather communities back together. Adi Barkan understood this. He could no longer walk. He could no longer raise a fist. He couldn't even hold his own child. But he could still raise his voice. The irony, he said, was that the weaker I get, the louder we become. And so maybe that could become our own prayer. That the weaker we begin to feel, and when those things that we have been grieving, like political violence and gun violence and people starving in Gaza, and the anger towards one another, and families divided by differences, by environmental destruction, or the state of education in this state, or the death of a beloved pet, the death of a father, the death of a spouse, and yes, even the state of Oklahoma State football. When all those things feel like they are too much for us alone to handle, it's in those moments when our laments might grow louder, so God can use them to gather other people around us until those she's and you's and me's turn into us's and into we's. And it's there where hope begins. Return us, Lord, to yourself. Please let us return. Give us new days, like those long ago. In the name of the Creator, and the Christ, and the Spirit.